Hey, my name is Matt Storr and I repair saxophones for a living, and today I would like to show you the left-hand pinky table mechanism of a Conn 30M. It's also the same for a 26M with a couple minor variations with how it's attached to the body, but basically everything else is the same. Now, this is an unusual mechanism and it's hard to see when the horn's put together, so although I've already done an overview of the 30M and the 26M that was like, almost a half hour long, I figured I would go ahead and add to it. Just to kind of like lay out exactly how this works because it's a bit unusual and it can be daunting. I mean, I still find it pretty difficult. Every time I do one of these, a 30M usually takes me about twice as long as a regular 10M, with the end result being that after everything is completely done, it's much easier to adjust. But when you first, if you have to strip it all the way down, do an overhaul, it just takes a lot longer. Now, the way this is set up is quite different. You see, you've got these rods right here. The entire left-hand pinky table pivots on one, two, three, four rods that are, I guess, what would that be? Perpendicular. They lie transverse to the body tube. So the motion of the left-hand pinky table is straight up and down, not across like usual, right? And let's see, I can actually show you the difference. You probably know what I'm talking about, but just in case you don't. So this is a regular left-hand pinky table where the rods are directly connected, go all the way down to what they're actually going to actuate, and they go across the body, right? Now that's normal for every horn, except for the Conn 30M and the 26M, where they're specifically engineered to go straight up and down. They also don't have a ton of travel. They're also very, very smooth, particularly like the left-hand C sharp, which I've done a video on that shows just that. But even the G sharp goes straight up and down. Everything goes straight up and down. And it's a pretty complex mechanism that is adjusted through the use of these perma-just screws. Now, what is a perma-just screw? So that is on Conn 30M and 26Ms, instead of having like pieces of cork of various thickness or whatever material between two keys to control those relationships, they have these little screws that can go in and out. Doop, 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 doop. And usually you would actually adjust them with, where did I put it? A spring. They've got these little holes, and you would put the spring in the hole, and that's the way you can adjust it from afar. If it's off the horn, obviously you can use your fingers. When it's on the horn, you're going to want to use a spring. And in this hole right here would normally be a locking screw. I don't have that put in yet because I haven't put the horn together yet. So you've got those little perma-just screws all over the place here to control different relationships. And what I want to do is point out how it works. Okay, so I've got this seated. Pardon it for being floppy. I'm holding it in a way that like the spring tensions aren't enough to like lift it. I probably need to adjust that B flat. It's a little bit light. And also you might notice it's noisy. I haven't lubricated this yet because the way that you work on a 30M or a 26M is to do the left-hand pinky table first. And then you can move stuff out of the way and get back at it later. Like I'll take the B and the B flat off. I'll probably take these out to like trim all my corks, make sure everything looks beautiful, and then I'll start seating pads. I'll put these back in later. So they haven't been lubricated yet because that would just make a mess since I know I'm taking it back apart. But the first thing I do on a Conn 30M, usually actually I'll do the octave mechanism just because I like having that done, but is the left-hand pinky table, which is unusual and a little bit backwards. Now, the actual stuff, as far as how is everything is actually put together, I want to go ahead and show that, point out the little different pieces. So if you're working on one of these, it can give you a bit of a shortcut versus like figuring out from first principles. So let's see if I crank my camera down a little bit. Okay, and I'll use a screwdriver as a pointer. Okay, so the G sharp, you've got the G sharp pad key. Once you have done everything and you've got your pad seated, you actually put a piece of felt directly onto the pad cup. Now, obviously, do that after because you don't want to have to heat it up again, and you can't. If you have to heat it up again to reseat it, you got to take this off, put a new one on. That's where the perma-just foot for the F sharp sits, right? So the relationship between the G sharp, spatula and the G sharp key is right here. I usually put like a little piece of Teflon over this little rounded piece, and then like a piece of cork with Teflon over it here, so it slides like super easy. And if you want to adjust that relationship, you can either change the thickness of your adjustment material here, or this arm is designed to be bent. And that'll change the relationship as far as your height of your G-sharp spatula relative to the G-sharp pad. Now your B is actuated here. This is actually a part of a long key that the B is on. If we flip it over, let's see, can we see? So the B comes under here, right? And is actuated by that B spatula under here, which the relationship between those is controlled by a perma-just foot here. Let's see, can I get some better light? Perma-just foot here that hits this little tab here, and that's the actual B key itself. And you'll notice the spatula is not sprung, right? It actually relies on the spring power of that B key and the G sharp to keep it in place. And it ends up basically being trapped between, so it doesn't move, between the underside of the B flat spatula and the actual B key arm here itself. Now this little arm, it can be bent all over the place, and that can be pretty difficult to like figure out where it's supposed to be originally. It's mostly straight. Sometimes it has like a little bit of a bend in the end, but you want a thin piece of adjustment material wrapped around it, top and bottom, and at rest it needs to be contacting the G sharp here, because when the B gets pushed down, it actuates the G sharp, and it does that without being pushed on, right? And then it needs to be contacting the B spatula right here, right? Which is held in place with the B flat spatula. Now the B flat spatula's height is controlled back here on the, it's kind of hard to see, but this is actually the bottom of the B flat spatula, and there's a little perma-just screw here. Let's see, can I get like a slightly better shot of that? Yeah, there it is. So you control the height of the B flat spatula, which traps the B spatula where it needs to be, so that when you've decided your key heights, which is controlled by the felt up here, the B spatula is where it's supposed to be, resting nice and flat with everything else, with no loss motion. I mean, when I press this, right, everything moves at once, even though there's no lubricant right now. It's not making any clanking noises. It's not making any extra clicks. The only things we're hearing are the closing of the B pad, and then when I let go, the closing of the G sharp. And also you've got your normal piece of adjustment material between the G sharp and the B spatula right here, which obviously needs to be contacting as well. So the places this will be contacting is against the B flat here, against the B pad key here, against the G sharp here, and the B pad key needs to be contacting the G sharp here, and that's when it is at rest and contacting its felt. Okay, so the C sharp's a little bit easier. The C sharp needs to be contacting the G sharp on the back end here. You can see right there like normal. When it is at rest, which means that the C sharp pad is closed. And the C sharp pad height is controlled by the G sharp. So the C sharp will go down. There's nothing else stopping it except the G sharp. So that'll give you your C sharp height. And if you end up with a really weird C sharp height, then you need to start checking your relationship between your G sharp here. Okay? Now, the B flat actuates the B flat pad key back here. Let's see if we can get it. Sorry for the weird angles. It's just like hard to control everything at once. So let me flip it around actually. All right, so the B flat touches the B flat key which is here. See that moving under there? So there's a little piece of adjustment material here, and there's a perma-adjust foot. Let's see if I can get the C sharp out of the way and you can see it a little better. Yeah, there it is. Right here. There's a perma-adjust foot that's interacting with the B flat pad key here. It pushes down on it. See if we can get the whole thing in shot. So you see the B flat key comes along here, goes underneath. The perma-adjust screw is like right behind where the C sharp arm is, pushing down on it. Meanwhile, the height of the B flat spatula is controlled by a perma-adjust screw here. So at rest, it should be in contact with, here we can see it a little bit. At rest, it should be in contact with the B flat right here from the perma-adjust screw, the B flat pad key, and in contact with the body from the perma-adjust screw here, so that the end result is no play, no movement, and a nice flat table, right? So we've got this flat table all the way across at rest. Press the C sharp, moves the G sharp at the same time. Press the B, moves the G sharp at the same time. Press the B flat, moves the B and the G sharp at the same time. Now, the adjustment between the B and the B flat to make them close at the same time is completely removed from these actual keys, which is unusual. The place that happens is under here, which we looked at earlier. It's the same adjustment that holds the B spatula key in place. It is that guy right there. Now, a lot of times you'll end up with kind of a lot of space between these two. Come on, focus. End up with a lot of space between these two. So I'll usually they don't actually slide against each other very much at all. Their fulcrums are so close to each other. There's a tiny bit of sliding, but not much. But usually I will put like a piece of Teflon or something there just to take up a little bit extra room so I don't have a super thick piece of cork. And if that piece is not thick enough, then your B will be sticking up well proud of the B flat. So I probably did a terrible job explaining it, but it really is it is that complex. And this takes me several hours to just do the left-hand pinky table on this. I mean, usually it's a couple hours to do a left-hand pinky table on a horn for me anyways to get it feeling right. But on a 30M, it's usually probably 4 hours. So that is a detail of the left-hand pinky table mechanism on a Conn 30M. Hopefully that was helpful, useful, and informative. And I'm talking about it, and it's just like, this thing is crazy. I mean, I think I understand it. I think I got it. Every time I do these horns, they end up okay. But it's always just sort of there's so many things you can do, right? You could adjust this perma-adjust foot downwards and make this material thinner, on either side. Or you could try and bend this and it's like the adage about, cutting a foot off the bottom of a blanket and sewing it to the top. You don't end up with a longer blanket. There's lots of different ways that this can work, but it really seems like there's really one position where it's easiest. If you find yourself going crazy on these, that's totally okay. If you find that it isn't working, then there's something wrong in some chain here of how everything is relating to itself. Pay very close attention when you disassemble these to how it's set up. If you're lucky and you get an original factory setup, you'll probably just have to mess with your adjustment materials, right? You won't actually have to worry about has anything been bent. But if someone has bent one of these around because they didn't, they weren't able to achieve a good result when they were working on it, then you might have a lot of detective work to do to try and get this stuff back in its original position. And perhaps that's one of the reasons this video might be useful is this horn had original pads on it. And so I didn't have to do much bending on anything here to get to the place that it's at right now. And so that's kind of what an original setup looks like, what the thickness of the cork under the G sharp should look like, what the angle of the arm for the G sharp should look like, how the table ends up being flat and how it moves, and the key heights I ended up with. But, it still took me a while to do. So Anyway, there you have it. Hopefully that's useful. Thanks for watching.